Welcome to the Wander Mode podcast, where we celebrate the fearless spirit of women embracing life's wanderings. Where every story is a spark of inspiration and reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful moments happen when we simply embrace wherever the journey may lead. On today's episode, I get to chat with Allison Ly, a talented therapist, coach, and founder of Unshaken Gens. As an Asian American therapist, Allison is dedicated to helping second-generation adult children of immigrants create the happy and healthy relationships that they crave the most, without sacrificing their dreams, their desires, or their mental health. Today, we'll dive into her journey as an entrepreneur, her impactful work, and the wisdom that she shares with her clients. All right, Allison, I'm really looking forward to jumping into our conversation today and seeing where it goes. But I love starting with, where are you at in your headspace as we start this interview?
So right before I got on this with you, I was stretching, I was doing some yoga, and it felt really nice. So actually, I'm looking forward to jumping back into that when we're done.
Little bit of pre-interview session and a post-interview session.
Yeah. And it's just when in the mornings, it's like when you wake up, and because I sleep in the fetal position too, so I get really tight. So it just feels nice to just stretch and move a little bit before the day starts. And it's a little earlier on my side than where you are.
Yes, because you're coming from the Pacific Coast and I'm in the Midwest. And yes, a little later here than it is for you. Okay, I think that's a cool spot to jump in. So do you do yoga every morning, and do you integrate any sort of meditative practices into that as well?
It's been very inconsistent with what I choose to do. There was this training that I bought, and I have a bunch of courses that I buy because I always like to learn, where they had this 30-day audio thing that I can listen to about money and mindset. I was doing that for a little bit in the morning. Sometimes I just have to drink my coffee. Like, I have this routine. The stretching is new, and I've actually been waiting till I'm awake in the daytime with my daughter. She's 2 and we do yoga together. I do yoga. She moves around and she tries to copy me. So I've been trying to do that with her since I was like, why do it by myself if she can also do it? And it's like a bonding experience. So I've been playing around with different things, but I do like to have my coffee, stretch, listen to something, and I listen to podcasts. I do meditations at night, and I journal at night sometimes, not all the time, but I do the meditations at night.
So it's curious to me that you brought up the money mindset meditations. I've been hearing more and more about those. And I don't know if it's because I joined the boss mom space, or if it's because I'm also listening to podcasts of women who are trying to manifest money and clients and flow in their business or things like that. But have you already noticed any differences, whether it's this yoga practice and stretching with your daughter in the morning, or the money and mindset meditations? Have you already noticed a difference for yourself?
Yeah, and I've actually been working on this money mindset for years, and I think it's a lifelong thing for, I think, a lot of people. And it's just really nice to remember sometimes that money is really external, and how we feel about ourselves and what we perceive other people with money do or don't do really is just external, right? Because they're taking action with money. What I value and what I believe in is just heightened by how I spend my money, right? So it's not so much that money is bad or good. It's just like, where do I find value? Where do I want to spend my time, my energy, or not spend my time and energy, and use money as a resource to support that? It just helps to have this reminder where it's very detached from who I am, in the sense that money is detached from who I am, but how I choose to spend it is a part of how I see my values and how I want to spend my time. If that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense, because actually my husband and I had a conversation last night, and when you get into the entrepreneurship space, I feel like there are opportunities that present themselves, where money making opportunities present themselves, and you're kind of curious about what those opportunities might do or might bring to your life. And we recently were presented with an opportunity that we've been trying to consider for the last few months. And ultimately what it came down to for us is, I don't think that we're going to go forward with it, because although the money making opportunity in and of itself is great, our values of time together as a family, and me having some flexibility with being able to be with my daughter more and traveling, like, that would be greatly impacted by this opportunity. And so, to your point, money can facilitate a lot of things in our lives, but we have to constantly come back to those values that money really can't buy happiness. And if you think that it can, or you make decisions just thinking that the more money that I'm making, the happier I'm going to be, but you're sacrificing your values to make that work, it doesn't work. It becomes counterproductive.
Yes, definitely. And it's sometimes a really hard decision, right? It's all this money. But yeah, when you come boil it down to your values and how you want to spend your time, it helps to have a more definitive answer versus let's just get all this money and think that it's going to help with happiness or joy.
Yes. So tell me a little bit about what your core values are as a mom and as a business owner, because I know for me, in transitioning from a W-2 job, I had these ideas about what my values were as a teacher. And then when I became a mom, my values shifted a little bit in what I actually prioritized more than a job and things like that. So where are you finding your core values are at right now?
I think the first one that pops up into my mind is really empowering. I really want to be a teacher, not a teacher, but like teaching, like constantly to my daughter, to my clients, give people options, empower them with tools and knowledge so that they can make an informed decision on what they want to do. Because I think without that knowledge or the options or the opportunities to just decide with as much information as they can have, it could feel like they're stuck or like they have this one road that they have to go down and it's not really what they truly want. So empowering people to really make an informed decision and knowing that you have options is really important to me in my work, in my personal life, and with my daughter especially, right? Like I think just trying to teach her as much as I can about what's available and helping her. And she's 2, so like I have to decide for her more, but to help guide her in making like decisions that really work for her as well.
My daughter is 3.5, but I definitely hear you on that. Really trying to be cognizant around my language with her about, oh, okay, so you feel full. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and stop eating. Or you pick out what you feel like wearing today. Or asking her a question, should we do this today or should we do that today? Obviously, in life, there are decisions that she can't decide. Like sometimes we just have to go to the grocery store, we just have to do whatever, but trying to make her a lot more aware of what do preferences feel like. What does my energy feel like today? Am I high energy and I want to go run around and play at the park? Or I'm feeling like really low key energy and I want to sit here and play with this train or read this book. And you're absolutely right. Just like we do that with adults, like it is so interesting that we have to start with our kids so young and also teaching them what it feels like to be empowered and to listen to what we need and what we
Yeah.
want. We can't always get what we want, but we can focus on the things that we do need to be paying attention to.
Yeah, and what's interesting is for moms, it could be easier to give those options to our kids, but it's so hard to do it for ourselves. Adults, men too, but I think moms and I think for my clientele, adults with immigrant parents, they have a hard time checking in with themselves and giving themselves options because they are constantly thinking about other people, how to support the family or how to take care of others, that they actually don't do that check-in with themselves as much as they do with other people. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's so great that like when we're able to teach that to our kids young, they can have that early on and hopefully practice that throughout their lives. And then as we're doing it to our kids or to whoever, hopefully we're also giving ourselves that choice and that empowerment and checking in with ourselves too.
So much harder to do it yourself. It's so much easier to teach someone else saying, set boundaries and practice self care.
Mhm.
Why do you think that is? Why is it so much harder to do that for ourselves than to teach other people or our kids how to do it?
I think when we're in our own heads, I think it's easy for us to think I can handle it and maybe not that other people can't handle it, but just that I can handle it, right? It doesn't mean that it's dismissing other people's abilities, but at least for my clientele too, like my adults with immigrant parents, they are the ones that like grew up in the US. They are the ones that really learned the systems like school and are more educated in some ways with where they're living now. So then they think they can hold a lot more responsibility, like carry a lot more on their shoulders because they know more, right, in a different sense. And then that just gets carried on as they get older. So a lot of it is mindset and like beliefs about what they are supposed to do, what they should be doing. And I think sometimes too, if anyone when they're young and they don't have other options presented, they think that this is the way I have to be. I have to be self-sacrificing. I have to think about other people first all the time, which, yes, we do think about other people, but we need to put ourselves in rotation too and have that practice. And without that practice, it's really hard to have that ingrained and feel quote unquote good about it and not feel guilty or not feel like, oh, we're taking up space or we're being selfish and whatnot. So it really starts with practice and having that, again, that option available, knowing that it's not quote unquote bad or whatever it is to take care of ourselves.
Right. So I think you're probably already touching on this, but can you tell me a little bit more about who you work with and what are some of the catalysts that cause them to come to you and say, okay, I need help with this?
Yeah, so I work with adults with immigrant parents. So they are born in the country their parents were not born in. So for me, I'm a second gen, for example. So my parents immigrated from Vietnam separately, and I was born here in the US. And what a lot of my clients, when they come to me, they are pretty burnt out. They are pretty tired, or they're noticing that they want to make a change in their life. So I have a therapy practice and a coaching practice. So then it's two different spaces when people come in, right? With therapy, it's like more of the burnout, more of the exhaustion, and the coaching, it's a little bit more preventative, like a little bit like, I want something different. How do I get this? I'm recognizing that I need to start making the shift, otherwise things might be a little bit worse. But generally speaking, there's this desire to not feel as burnt out, irritable, tired, and not having the relationships that they really want with their loved ones. Oftentimes, my clients find that they think cutting out their family members is the only way to preserve their energy because they've given so much and they've taken care of other people so much. But that actually goes against what they want. The fact that they're giving so much to their family is because they care so much and they want to support them and spend time with them. But they're doing it in a way that's like really neglecting their needs. And then that leads them to the burnout and thinking, now I just need to cut everyone out so I have some space. But that's not the only option. And that is actually something that most of my clients never really actually want to do. They just need a better way to interact and create space for their feelings to take care of themselves while taking care of other people.
Okay. Can you expand a little bit? So your clientele is pretty specific. Individuals with immigrant parents. What do you see are the specific challenges for individuals with immigrant parents compared to, let's just say, being third generation here or fourth generation here? Or maybe you're even willing to expand on your own story that you experienced in having immigrant parents.
Yeah, so I have a framework that kind of explains this a little bit. It's called the repay cycle. And the first step is awareness. So it's awareness, repay, self sacrifice, and mixed emotions. And the first step is awareness. And the awareness is from the parents and from the child, adult child, that is aware of the fact that they, again, know the language, they know how to navigate the systems, they're more acculturated to where they are born in, and they have much more resources to be able to support the parents, like with technology as they get older, or just with translating, completing paperwork, because they know more of the language. So then there could be these expectations from the parents for the adult child to do well, to help support the family, to do this and that for them, right? Because they can, they're more equipped to, in a sense, right? Maybe more language wise and resources wise. And then there could be an internal desire, which I also had, of wanting to help my family. Of course, I would help them. If I saw someone trying to scam my family or fill out a paperwork incorrectly, I'm going to help them. I'm not going to just sit there, even as a 10-year-old or whatever I knew at that time. Of course, there's going to be pressures from the person and externally, and a desire from themselves as well to do that. And I think that's where it really stems from. And just knowing that trust is also really scary when we're moving to a new country, or there isn't a lot of people to support or depend on with the family. So then the adult child then wants to like support the family too. So it comes from just care and recognizing that there's different types of privileges and access and support that their family has compared to other families. And that makes it a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, I can completely see that. My husband and I travel a lot, and it's always this thing that I think you get a little dose of appreciation when you come back home. And it's that familiarity and that ease with which you can exist in life that you just don't have when you're in places that are a lot less familiar, whether it's a language perspective, spending money, right? And granted, it's a trip. So you recognize there's this end date, But like on a larger scale, I could see how in moving to a completely different country and you know that this is long term, there isn't this, I'm going to exit and then I'll go back to the ease with which my life existed before in 7 days. It's like, no, now we're here and we have to adapt and we have to figure this out.
Yeah. And then there's all this other reasons too, right? If it's great if there's no trauma, no war or things that are making people move, but when there's the history of that too, and they're not able to deal with that because they're in survival mode, that can cause a lot of tension and conflict too within themselves, or just have a trickle down effect on the family. And like, again, just that familiarity that you're talking about, right? If like where they left all their home, the things that they're familiar with, their friends, their family, there's no one else to really have that full on trust and support with other than family. That's why a lot of times the responsibility and that burden, if people can feel that way sometimes too, and the help and the support does come from family members, and oftentimes children who are growing up here have more resources and knowledge and language capacity and things like that to help.
Can you tell a little bit about your story with your parents and your parents leaving Vietnam and coming here? And did you know growing up that you wanted to be in this space where you are able to help other people? Or did that come about for you as an adult, like post a different type of W-2 job? How did that come to be?
Yeah, so my parents came to the US separately. So it's not like they came together. Somehow they met. And my mom actually flew over because my aunt came over first and was able to bring her over. My dad left by boat because of the war. This was all around the wartime. So when I grew up, I actually really enjoyed reading because it was an escape, and I actually thought I wanted to major in journalism because I just really liked writing and reading. But once I got into college, I took my first sociology class and I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. And then I majored in sociology, minored in Asian American studies, and I knew I wanted to be like a therapist of some sort. I don't know how because I never had like much access to therapy, but I was like, I need to help adults with immigrant parents. I need to work with the Vietnamese people. Came out of school and was a case manager at this Vietnamese mental health clinic. And then I went into grad school and I worked with another mental health clinic in the area that I grew up in, San Gabriel Valley in California. And I worked with Vietnamese families too. So I actually felt a lot of guilt leaving the mental health clinic. And I moved into actually school districts to be a mental health provider through the school districts. But there was a lot of guilt leaving, specifically working with Vietnamese people, because I knew the language. I knew how difficult it was for my parents to get support in their language. And then I had all this shame and guilt about like, I am leaving my people. But like, actually the work I'm doing now, I'm still working with a lot of Asian Americans, Vietnamese, Chinese people, and I'm not abandoning them in any way. And it's just different how I'm supporting them now. And I had to like really work on recognizing that and like really seeing that I could still help people in different ways, and I'm not really abandoning them as long as I am trying to help the community that I grew up in, just in different ways.
Was there a pivotal moment where you were like, I need to transition into entrepreneurship and doing this for myself and helping people in this way compared to being in the school district? Was there a catalyst for that decision?
COVID happened, so that made that decision pretty easy. So I was in two school districts and I transitioned to one that was like a scholarship, a government funded position. And then COVID happened, so that got shut down, and it was a blessing in disguise. Like I got to do my private practice full time. I really enjoyed it, and I actually had a harder time in the school districts than I thought I would because I have a PPSC, which a pupil personnel service credential that allowed me to work in school districts with my mental health background. But I think there was a lot of loops I had to go through to help someone where it just made it a lot more difficult versus being an entrepreneur and just like working with a client one-on-one, and they getting to decide, they get to reach out to resources or figure out what they want to do to decide their own journey. So I actually really enjoyed that. And the catalyst for me actually full-time diving into like entrepreneurship was like I wanted to start a family. And that's when I took my first money course, where I had to really check in with myself of like, I can't work 8 hours a day nonstop and like, have a family. I mean, I could, but I didn't want to. That wasn't something I wanted to do because I wanted to spend more time with my family. So COVID, the school district not renewing, and then really having this desire for more flexibility in my schedule to be with my family that I wanted to grow at that time. And yeah, having that freedom and self ability to take care of myself better is what I really wanted.
I think COVID was that for a lot of us. I remember because I had been in the school district for, at that time, it would have been 13 years. And I never knew anything different. I didn't have any kids at home. I had been a teacher for 13 years. I absolutely loved it. I went to school every day. And all of a sudden, COVID happened, and we're doing online learning. And I had my daughter in 2020 in November. And I just remember sitting here thinking, oh, wow, your day can look different when you're teaching online, and I can now make lunch at home, or I could go nurse my daughter, or I could do whatever I needed to do. And it was one of those moments similar to what you're saying, where it shifts your perspective. Some because you had your position or the grant wasn't continuing to be funded, but at the same time, like, I think too, sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. And when you don't try something drastically different, or feeling like you have to be creative with how you set up your days, it can be this crazy world when all of a sudden you recognize, whoa, I can have power over that. I could set my hours. I can then have more time with my family. It opens up this whole different world of possibility of what your job or making money can look like.
Yeah. And yeah, I didn't know how much I wouldn't have preferred being in a school district, because I went to school thinking this is what I want. I want to be in the school district, right? But actually, it was more, yeah, not really what I wanted at the end of the day. And I wouldn't have known until I tried. And then, yeah, that blessing in disguise of it just not being renewed pushed the gas button for me to really go full time into the private practice.
Going back to something you said earlier too, one of the things that I love about entrepreneurship is that it is really empowering, because you're setting your own goals and you are in control of what you choose to do to go toward those goals. There's something when you're working for someone else, and especially with a school district, that all comes down to state budgets and funding and things that are completely like 100% outside of your control. It can feel really discouraging to do work in those environments sometimes, because the system itself is so much bigger than you are, that it can feel a little bit like, yes, I want to do these things, but there are restrictions and I can't. And so, to your point, in being able to leave and then be able to practice the way that you wanted to, I would imagine that would feel really empowering, because now you have 100% control.
Which I also had to learn that the 100% control, I still went full force in like it was a regular job, until I was like, wait, do I want this? How is this going to look when I want to start a family, where I had to make that change? So I still did what I knew, right? That mindset, the mindset work is so important of, wait, what else could I do, right, with this? And actually challenge myself to do something actually more different than what I knew.
Oh, yes. And you're right. I did the exact same thing. Like, I was working more hours initially than I was even in my W-2 job. And it was that exact thing. Whoa, like, this is not why I was choosing to do this. So I do have control over that. And I have to learn to set some boundaries. Let's go more into the logistics behind you starting your own business. How did you get started with that? Did you hire a coach? Did you take an online program? Or did you just dive into it and just say, because of my previous experience, I can definitely do this coaching and therapy aspect on my own?
So the therapy, I just dove into my own, but I did do the money work, the mindset work about charging, like cancellation fees, all that stuff, right? Because before in community mental health, it was easy to be like, the business says I have to charge this or I have to do this, right? It's just easy to like brush it off and say that someone else is making me do this. Whereas I'm my business now, I'm the one making these decisions. So I had to be really aware and in tune with why I'm doing certain things, right? Why are these my policies? Why is that beneficial for my client? Why is that beneficial for me? When I went into the coaching space, I took so many courses. I loved all the things that I learned about coaching and how that could be separate from therapy, how to navigate the legalities of that, because I went to school for therapy. So I knew a lot of that stuff. But with the coaching, I was like, how do I make sure that this is separate from my therapy? And I really wanted to make it clear and for me to feel good about it ethically and legally. So yeah, I love learning too. So I bought I bought a legal course template and the coaching program there. I was with Dana and Boss Mom with the Nurture to Convert for the messaging. I'm in like, I bought a lot of different courses and I love learning, and it's all been very beneficial because this is newer for me. but a lot of learning. And I love coaching and being coached because it really challenges me again to think of what I want to do, why I'm doing certain things. So I always encourage everyone to like learn from people to shortcut your process and not take the long route just because we think we can do it all. And I think that's actually a mindset shift too that I had to do, of trying to hustle and do it all on my own and not spend money so that I felt like I earned it.
And you're right. There are limitless options out there that allow us to learn truly anything that we want to learn about or how to do. It's just about picking the right resource and I think the right person for you. And you have a pretty niche audience, but do you filter at all who comes to you and whether or not they're right to work for you? I've been talking with so many more coaches in this space that as much as they want the business, they're also recognizing like the client has to be right for me. So what's your process there?
I think it's really checking in with their goals. So with my therapy practice too, we do have like a consult call. So it's a little bit different. But with coaching, I think it's just really being aligned with, are these your goals? These are the goals that my program can help you with. Are these aligned with what you want to do? I think it's just really making it clear like who this is for and who this is not for in terms of the coaching. And I do agree with what you're saying too, where people do have to find a good fit for both parties. And I think being very open and letting people know if this is a good fit or not, even after they've joined, is a difficult but important conversation to have.
Yeah, it comes back to that money mindset is that the money is not worth it if the if you can't align with those that are paying you the money. And really, that person wouldn't be super thrilled with the results, anyways, if you're not the right
Right.
person.
And that goes back to my value of empowerment, right? I have to empower myself to speak up for what I'm seeing. They have to speak up for what they're seeing, or if it's not a good fit. Everyone has a right to speak up. And I think that's really important for me. Yeah, having those challenging conversations is still very beneficial and
Mhm.
needed.
Yes, definitely. Because you're so personally connected with those that you serve. How do you set boundaries for yourself, like emotionally, from a time perspective? Just because I would imagine your heart is in the right place and you're wanting to help everybody, but I think sometimes we can lose a little bit of ourselves in that as well and not necessarily prioritizing ourselves. So, what do you do to set boundaries around that?
So I do my own self-care first of all, right? I have my own therapy, I have my own coaching. So like I'm able to take care of myself in those ways. And really I check in with my body to see how I'm feeling. And when I'm in an actual meeting with clients, whether it's therapy or coaching, it's really seeing what do they need, right? Not what do I need and what do I want, but focusing more back on them. And yes, recognizing, oh, that is something I've experienced too. But then taking note of it and either writing it down or just making sure that I check in with that later is what really helps, because again, going back to empowerment, it's not about what I think is right for them, right? They have to come to their own conclusions in both spaces, in therapy and coaching. So it's just, again, what information can do I have that I know has worked for my clients and is generally helpful that I could tell them so they could decide what they want to do. That's a boundary for me, where I don't like just necessarily say, oh, this is something you should try. And of course it could be recommendations, but again, like giving them more options so that they could choose.
Can you give me an example of a client that has had a really big transformation where they were able to reach those goals that they wanted?
Oh, it's hard to pick. I think maybe it in lines with boundaries, right? Many of my clients struggle with setting boundaries, but there's one in particular where they had a hard time saying no to like their friends, had a hard time saying no to anyone. So they always said yes, always answered everyone's calls, but then never really reached out for support on their own. But until they started recognizing, like, oh, what do I need? They were able to speak up for what they didn't want. And once they started doing that, when other people started saying no to them, they weren't as offended, because before they thought everyone was going to be hurt by the fact that they said no to someone. So when they started implementing that in small ways by just even rejecting gifts or offers, like, and not accepting everything, they were able to be like, oh, this they're not offended by it. I'm not offending them, and they felt better about being able to do that. So they were able to see, okay, not every boundary I set is going to hurt someone's feelings, especially if I communicate it in a way that is, you know, acknowledging their efforts and things like that.
Brene Brown has this idea behind the story that we tell ourselves. And you sharing that example is exactly that. Like in our minds, we think that we know what other people are thinking. We think that we know that we're going to offend somebody through saying no or rejecting this, that, or the other thing, rather than just saying, I'm not going to tell a story. I'm just going to do what I need to do within setting a boundary and saying no, or I'll accept your offer of help later. And oftentimes it plays out way better than the story that we tell ourselves is going to be the reality. It's so funny. I don't understand why we do that so much, because it's with a lot of things.
Yeah, it's this mind reading, right? Of they're going to think this and that about me. Maybe because they've had bad experiences about it, or it's really coming from this fear and worry of rejection on the person's kind gesture, whatever it may be. Oftentimes, I'm like, the most important question I ask is, what would you do if a friend said no to you? They'll be like, oh, that's fine. Like they don't care. But when we think other people are going to be upset because we said no, thank you, it's so opposite of what our answers would be. And then having that moment of, yeah, I'd be totally fine with it because that's their choice. Then that's like this perspective taking that really helps them snap out of that mind reading and thinking that they know what everyone else is going to respond to them.
Do you feel like culturally there's a difference between other places in the United States, perhaps in rejecting offers of help? Like that is truly more offensive to do that in other cultures?
There could be this idea of like just saving face, right? Where we don't like quote unquote disrespect someone by saying no or not accepting a gift. But the work that I do with my clients, it actually boils down to this love language more than anything, I think, or this capacity to give and to support. So, for example, like with my mom, right? Like she loves to cook for me, and that's one way that she really shows love and care. And one of the ways that she could mainly show me love and care, right? Because she can't really help me with my work stress, or like when I was filling out college applications, she couldn't do that for me, or it's probably be easier if I just did it myself. So then when she's offering me food, for example, and that's her love language, and I reject it, or if I'm like, oh no, thank you, then the quote unquote only way that she knows how to support me is being cut off. And that could be where like the hurt feelings come up. But like, how do I communicate that to her to be like, thank you so much, I really appreciate this, and I love your food, but right now I just really don't want it, I'm not hungry, it's nothing about you. Like, how do I tell her these things so that I acknowledge it without making her feel like it's a rejection, even though it's totally not? And that's a lot of explanation on my part, but if that helps me set the boundary, I'm going to do it. I'm going to have to share all of that so that I feel better about what I'm doing. And I know that she feels potentially better than she would have if I hadn't explained all that.
I can completely see how that would be true, that if you can put yourself in their shoes of their why and saying it's not about you not valuing what it is that they're offering, but rather this is adding more stress for you than it is helpful. Like, how can you have some of that redirection to where both of you are having your whys attended to?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What a powerful thing. So have you ever talked with your parents about what you do and who you provide help with? Or have they been able to also give you some insight into their perspective that have helped you work with your clients?
That's interesting. I don't really talk to my parents about the work I do. They know what I do, but yeah, it's really interesting because I don't give them that many details because I don't know, it just never really comes up. And it's not because it's so connected to their life or anything like that. I actually was asked this recently on another podcast, and I'm like, no, it's not that. I'm like, oh, I'm working on stuff that you're experiencing, and that's why I don't want to bring it up to you. It just doesn't come up. But I feel like I try to use things that I know to help empower them, and I do it more towards them versus telling them about what I do, if that makes sense. I use what I know to give them tools and more information when appropriate versus this is what I do with my clients, mom and dad, or whatever. I don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I hear you on that. Like, even for me transitioning away from a teacher is it's a very public job. People, and we've been through school, so people understand like this is what a teacher does. And I think sometimes you're absolutely right. Like, I don't talk with my family either about this is what it looks like in a day in my life as an entrepreneur. I totally hear what you're saying in terms of it not coming up as like a natural conversation. So I think the last question I would have is, how has becoming a mom changed your therapy or your coaching practice, either from a time perspective or a values perspective, or more I just have that now as like an added piece of understanding to my mindset?
So Being a mom really makes me value my time a lot more. I think even outside of my client time, like face-to-face time or whatnot, I try to be very organized about how I do the paperwork or the other admin, whatever work that I need to do so that I could have more time with her and just like really fully feel I'm able to just relax. So setting boundaries around my work is also really helpful. But during my sessions, I don't think it really changes all that much because, again, it's like what the client's bringing into the session. But it definitely helps me really see the benefits of thinking more long term goals for my clients, right? Thinking what's the bigger picture that you're actually wanting and striving towards that, pushing that a little bit more so that they have this like bigger goal, bigger outcome, bigger picture of what they want versus just like dealing with the day to day. So like, of course we deal with it, but reminding ourselves of the bigger picture is also really helpful. And I think that's what I do for me. Whereas if this is like what I want to do, how do I make sure that I also make time to spend with my family and all that, which is like the bigger picture of what I want in addition to these two things.
Like you said, with the long-term impacts, generational impacts. But yes, thinking broader picture, I think there's something that happens when we become moms. And I think it's not really about just your time anymore or just your feelings about things or just your needs. It does open up your perspective a little bit more on thinking about others and thinking about things in a different way than I think just you would think about them. I don't want to say that we're all selfish or things like that before we become parents, but to some level, like when you have to prioritize someone else, it does shift your perspective in thinking bigger picture rather than just like this one thing that's here right in this moment.
And yeah, even just caretaking for other people too, right? Kids or no kids, it's just like always having to look at the bigger picture. Just like I was telling you with my clients, when they don't take care of themselves or think of the bigger picture of the impacts of not setting boundaries or self-sacrificing, how does that impact the long-term relationship with their parents, with their friends even, right? If they continue to just say yes to everything, like how does that impact them in the long run? Do they actually get closer or further away from the people that they actually care about?
And I think too, for all of us who have aging parents, and I know my husband and I have been having this conversation a lot too, is that things are going to look very different for us in the next 10 years than it has for most of our lives, and navigating that. And to your point, thinking longer term and what do we want that's going to make this situation the best for everybody, but also care for yourself at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's empowering work. And I love that you're in the coaching space and the therapy space at the same time. I think that almost makes it more impactful because people have the ability to process, but then people also have the possibility through the coaching of being proactive and, okay, now we need a plan. What is the process in choosing to work with you?
So they can go to my website. You can go to my website is Hey Allison Ly. So that's 2 L's and I, and then my last name is spelled Ly, heyallisonly.com. And that's the same handle on Instagram if you hang out there instead.
Very good. Well, we'll be sure to link everything in the show notes. And thank you so much for taking the time to tell your story today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Julie, for having me.
Thanks for wandering with me today. If you were inspired by this episode and think it would ignite a spark in a friend, don't hesitate to share. And if you're craving more from the Wander Mode community, hop on over to Instagram at WanderModeCo. Meet you in the next episode, and until then, wander on.